Hello, my beautiful entrepreneurs. Today we're going to talk about how to reduce your tax bill without reducing your cash flow. Now, this was something that I had actually done in my life. This is something that I implemented in my business in the first couple of years. So the first couple of years, I've always had a profitable business. And the first couple of years, I had just enough profit to give me a tax bill that I really couldn't afford. So I had to find ways to implement tax strategies in order to eliminate my tax liability without using the cash flow that I so desperately needed. So in my first few years, my tax bill was only 5 or 6K. At the time, that was so much money. That was money I did not have. I was still living paycheck to paycheck. I didn't have any money in my savings account. Like I lived off of every dollar that I earned in my business. And I didn't have the savviness that I have now, so many years later to be proactive about my tax strategies. I was an accountant that became an entrepreneur, and that's where I teach from, right? I was an accountant that became an entrepreneur, and I knew like the compliance and the data and the tracking, and then I learned how to be a business owner. But then there was that gap of like, okay, how do I manage my finances as an entrepreneur and not just an accountant who gets a W-2 paycheck? So that was like really helpful for me in my journey to help teach other entrepreneurs how to bridge this gap of like, oh, how do I manage my company as an entrepreneur when I'm used to living as a W-2 employee and I'm not necessarily out of that paycheck to paycheck mentality and or reality, right? So here are a couple of things. There's a couple of things I'll put them in a blog, but there's a couple of extra things that you can do to make sure that you don't eliminate your cash flow. So think of ways like look at your personal spending and look at your business spending and think of ways that they can kind of overlap and say, okay, what am I spending in my personal life that could be used as an actual business expense? And there are many different things that are available to you depending on your entity and status, whether you're an LLC or an LLC electing as an S Corp, whether you have employees or you don't have employees. This is such a great way to kind of revisit how are you doing things and how are you living and how are you working and how can some of those kind of cross over? So like, for example, retirement account. So when I was a W-2 employee, I used to contribute to my IRA account. When I became an entrepreneur, I stopped contributing to my IRA account and opened up a SEP IRA, a simple IRA. This is a beautiful IRA specifically for entrepreneurs, and you can put way more in than the 6,000, 6,500 per year that you can put the IRA, and it can be before taxes. So it's a really good way to think of like, okay, where am I spending my money already, and how can I make my business become the owner of that, or the driver of that, or the funder of that? Another good thing to think about is your receipts. I see this all the time, especially when you're just starting out. Like you forget your business debit card or your credit card or your personal credit card, and you kind of cross and mix expenses, and you forget that you paid for some stuff out of your pocket, out of your personal side. So it's money you've already spent, but you're not taking that deduction that can eliminate and or bring your tax liability down because it increases your expenses, right? So there's a couple of really core ways that we can kind of go through and say, okay, where have you already spent money or where you're already spending money? And how can we translate that to help your business carry that liability and asset to help you out? So remember that if you're just starting out, it's going to be really clunky and it's going to be hard because you're retraining your brain on and retraining your mindset and your habits and your actions and your tools and resources to be organized. But just remember that there's definitely ways to like, let's keep digging to see what ways are available to you to reduce your tax liability without reducing your cash flow. If you have any specific questions or things that have worked for you, I'm all ears. I'd love to hear about it. Next time, love, light, and money, honey.